Most of you probably think that Rey is the protagonist of the Star Wars sequel trilogy. I don't blame you. I'm pretty sure that the likes of Kathleen Kennedy and Rian Johnson also think that's true. Unfortunately for them, Rey is not the actual protagonist. I'm not even talking about if she is an active versus inactive protagonist, but that she, by the very nature of the role, is not one at all. See, a protagonist is the hero of his or her own story. The hero's story has to have certain elements in it, and that are outlined in something called the hero's journey. Now, there is definitely plenty of wiggle room in how this story unfolds, but one of the things that has to happen is the character follows an arc. The hero can be all-powerful and fall from grace. This is known as a negative arc. These are most common in tragedies such as Oedipus Rex and Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, or the character Walter White in Breaking Bad. The hero can also be a nobody and rise to power in a positive arc, like in Captain America, or the character Samwise in Lord of the Rings, or Ripley in Alien. The hero can even journey along what is known as a flat arc, where they don't change, but they change the world around them. The best examples of this are Katniss from the Hunger Games, Goku from Dragon Ball, or Paddington. A flat arc is the closest thing to what Rey has in these movies, but not only does she have a flat arc, the least interesting of the arcs, she also is a, more or less, inactive protagonist. She doesn't volunteer as tribute or take the ring to Mordor, she doesn't create a super suit, she's just good enough at everything, to make sure other, better characters don't die as they push the plot forward. It's like saying Arnold, as the Terminator in T2, was the protagonist. The thing that hurts her hero's journey the most, though, is not only does she have a flat character arc, she is also all-powerful and has no obstacles. She is morally incorruptible, stronger than her main enemy, and needs nothing from anybody else. Her biggest issue is that she was orphaned at a young age. Imagine if Harry Potter's only obstacle was dealing with life with no parents. He just straight up defeats Voldemort in the first movie with no help and is more powerful wizard than Dumbledore himself with literally no training or even the idea magic existed a few hours beforehand. It took him what, like 7 movies and literally dying to get the strength to take on his antagonist. So now that we know she isn't the real protagonist, who is? Is it Finn? Unfortunately, no, it is not. He is an interesting side character, but not the protagonist. I wish he were, though, over Rey, at least, as his story is so much more interesting and has so much more potential. Is it Poe? No, it is not Poe. The protagonist is actually Kylo Ren, or Ben Solo. So before you say, "That's impossible!" let me ask you this. Who was the protagonist of the original trilogy? Luke Skywalker. Who was the protagonist of the prequels? Anakin Skywalker. So why is it so hard to believe the protagonist is the son of Leia Skywalker, the grandson of Anakin, and the nephew of Luke? The protagonist is a Skywalker yet again, even if by accident. It makes sense to have the story be told through the actions of their descendants. But how is Kylo the protagonist? Because he is the one person driving the whole plot. Everything happening is happening because of his story. He was born to be the next Luke, the one that takes the torch passed down from his uncle and leads the Jedi in this new republic, but due to some, incidents, he chooses to not follow the path laid out for him. He goes out and finds a new master, and takes on the legacy of, not his uncle, but his grandfather, Darth Vader, setting into motion the entire story we see in the sequels. Fast forward to The Force Awakens, he is leading one of the first real operations carried out by the First Order, and the first one we get to see on screen. Right off the bat, he goes to demonstrate his power doing something actually pretty cool by stopping the blaster shot midair. But despite this, he's met with a belittling and sassy remark showing his enemy doesn't even take him seriously. All just to fail his mission through BB-8 escaping. It is then revealed that he is more or less equal to Hux in power of command, and is under somebody known as Snoke. So he is not all-powerful, and his obstacles start piling up. Then he has this little freak out showing he's also emotionally weak, and then spends the rest of the film trying and failing to complete his goals. Beat down and thwarted at every turn by this ominous rising threat to his world, the world that he completely set into motion and created. He then is defeated with a massive loss at the end of the first film. This allows him to have massive growth. He stops throwing tantrums and tries to sway his enemy to join him. He later gets the strength to overthrow and overcome a huge obstacle, Snoke. This additionally puts Kylo above Hux, his previous equal, who was always interfering with his plans. He showed crazy growth in The Last Jedi, and made some massive gains. But he still lost, and all of his enemies are together and regrouping. So he has his obstacles and growth, and he is active in driving the plot forward. But now let's talk about his relationship with his antagonist, Rey. He first really interacts with her in the interrogation scene, which he gets nothing out of, gets overpowered, and then she breaks out of custody. Later he gets to interact with her again in the final battle on Starkiller Base. This is the moment in The Empire Strikes Back when Luke loses his hand, his hope, the battle, and only gets saved due to plot armor and major conveniences. Kylo kills his dad for nothing, gets shot by Chewbacca, doesn't get his revenge on the traitor, and loses his fight with Rey. All of this to then only be saved because the ground broke between him and the antagonist. If not for that trench, he would have died, and Rey would have ended the story. Heroes all go through that loss, where they barely make it out and everything seems lost. It's called the death and rebirth, or the ordeal. This is clearly Kylo's death and rebirth, as from this moment on he is not the same character. He doesn't throw tantrums, he doesn't even really wear his mask, he's accepting his new role and is transformed. Where was Rey's ordeal? Where was her death and rebirth, her transformation? Completely absent. Kylo has his goals clearly laid out in front of him. Control the galaxy in the memory of his grandfather. Rey, Luke, and the rest of the Resistance are just in his way. Every time he tries to move forward, in his goal, the antagonist and her affiliates stop him. Once the first movie concludes, you're left asking, how could Kylo possibly stand a chance against Rey and the Resistance, especially after the loss of his Starkiller base? Our hero isn't as strong as the villain. His resources have been destroyed. He has obstacles in the form of Snoke and Hux. On top of all this, he's struggling with his inner demons. He spends the majority of the next film removing his obstacles to get his big victory. This is Luke rescuing Han and Leia, William Wallace killing the nobles who betrayed him, or Ripley forming a plan to leave the alien-infested colony. He then has another confrontation with his final inner and outer demon, Luke Skywalker, which is all just a distraction to allow the Resistance to escape. This is a false victory before the actual climax. He has legit story and an arc with struggles, obstacles, and failures. And when I first saw him, I hated him. As the villain.
Show me again the power of the darkness.
Let's take a look at the climax of The Force Awakens. We have our hero Rey, who is just ridiculously good at everything and beats and humiliates the villain that just struggled so hard and made extremely difficult decisions and sacrifices to get to this point. As the villain, he is this weak non-threat, and all the stakes are removed. Rey all but wins and is separated from delivering a final blow of any kind simply because it becomes impossible for her to do so. I already said the protagonist doesn't even have to be a good guy. Anti-heroes and the stories following bad people are pretty common. Watch the fight between them again. It screams in every frame of its structure that we should be rooting for Kylo. Yes, he has the red lightsaber and he's the one dressed in all black and he's the one that says mean stuff, but the way the scene plays out is contradictory to all of that. I mean, at this point in the movie, Rey is the Tom Brady of Star Wars, cheating in front of our eyes while the refs look the other way. Then by the second movie, Rey is even stronger on her 6th Super Bowl win for literally no reason, and while we see Kylo fight tooth and nail to claw his way up just to be dumped on again at the end of The Last Jedi. If Rey was the protagonist, she would have been the one that was shot just before the battle, or maybe just wounded by the duel, saved only by the decaying environment, but she wasn't. And when watching a movie that properly sets up a protagonist, you are cheering for them to finally get that win. But when the bad guy is the only one struggling, the only one with any stakes, any failures, he by very nature becomes the protagonist. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.